Welcome to Blending the Family, the podcast. Topics can range from finding your faith, dating after divorce, and mental health. Warning, you're about to listen to a conversation, not an interview. Here's your host, who was a stay-at-home dad and was actually outsourced, Tommy Maloney.
Welcome to another... Oh, hold on. Alexa, pause. I love Alexa. So cool. This is so cool. Hey, welcome to another edition of the podcast known as Blending the Family. What? I just told her to pause. I don't know what she's talking about. Anyway, where was I? I don't know. Welcome to the podcast known as Blending the Family. I am your host, Tommy Maloney. I am confined to the home office. My wife, Ann, is entertaining, and so, therefore, here I am, in the office. Oh, I think they're talking about me. I don't know. Anyway, hold on. Sip. Good stuff. Hey, on this episode of the podcast, let me bring up Kathy's information. Kathy Hammond, author of the book, How to Kill Your Husband's Ex, Attorneys, and Then Some, Ass-Kicking Advice for Stepmoms. Again, Kathy Hammond, How to Kill Your Husband's Ex, Attorneys, and Then Some, Ass-Kicking Advice for Stepmoms. Interesting. It was a really interesting interview. I'm going to go right there. I know we usually talk about other things that's going on in my life, but I want to talk about Kathy. I know Kathy's listening. Kathy, you were a wonderful guest. I just felt that some of the things that we talk about were very yin and yang. And so, coming from that point of view, I think it was a good interview because she had her point of view, I had my point of view. Just three things real quickly we talk about. Calendar. Very important in the world of divorce. You must have a calendar. We also talk about blood-sucking lawyers and men, you're going to write the check. Even though in our household that's not true. We do it totally different. But that's one of the things you'll hear is that a lot of things that we talk about might fit in your world, might not fit in your world. So, again, that's why I feel that it was a little bit of a tug of war with Kathy. But anyway, I hope Kathy's book does really well. I mean, it's a great title. How to Kill Your Husband's Ex, Attorneys, and Then Some. I think that's hilarious. I think it's a great title. Right then and there. Anyway, how are you doing? You doing good? If this is your first time listening to the podcast, thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for sharing, caring. Like I said, I'm right now confined to the home office. The wife is entertaining two of her really dear, close friends. And I got work to do. I'm not here to just sit around. So, there you go. I'm trying to think. Not a lot going on, really. Still hate. I'm really at the point in my life right now where I really want to take that leap of faith. Have you felt that? Taking that leap of faith where you just want to quit your day job. I've had an opportunity, a little bit of investment, to build this business a little bit more. And I need to speak to the wife about that. I mean, it's not a huge chunk of change, but it's still a good chunk of change to try and get more opportunities. Anyway, we'll talk about that some other time. Just super glad that you're subscribing to this podcast. And please mention to others to leave rating and reviews as far as however they get this podcast. If it's iTunes, if it's Stitcher, iHeartRadio. Please leave rating and reviews. I want to give a shout out to Kyle. Kyle's a very loyal podcast listener. Emails me from time to time, and so Kyle, I need to remind you, you're a great man, you're a great dad, great husband. Keep emailing me, let me know how you're doing, because it's awesome. It's really, really awesome. Anyway, I don't really have much to say tonight. Sorry, Ice Cube. That was an Ice Cube. Not the rapper, but an Ice Cube. Anyway, really cool. Love Alexa. Love having Alexa in the home office and throughout the house. I'm an 80s guy. I love the 80s music, so there you go. Anyway, we're going to get right back into Kathy Hammond, her interview, and I'm telling you, this is a great title of a book. How to Kill Your Husband's Ex, Attorneys, and Then Some, Ass-Kicking Advice for Stepmoms. Listen, even if you're not a stepmom, if you're a bonus dad, a lot of this information is very vital for you as well. So please, please purchase Kathy's book. Find her out there on the web. But this is, again, one of those situations where this book is really good for both men and women. I know I got in that trap when I wrote my first book, 25 Tips for Divorced Dads. I've had moms come up to me and tell me this book can work for moms as well. So there you go. All right? All right. That's it. That's all I got for you. Terry Crews, our man, the myth, the legend, who will one day be on this podcast. I believe it. I know it. I feel it. As Terry Crews would say, your success is my success. Here's my interview with Kathy Hammond. Enjoy. Peace out. So here's the first question coming out of the gate, Kathy. That is, why did you write this book?
You know, it was a book that I wish I had when I first married my husband and became a stepmother, and then hearing of other women having some trials and tribulations, and so I am, so I wrote the book to make sure that I could get some information out to people to be able to help them, and so that's why I did that.
But when you was first dating your husband, did you already know what was going on in his life?
You know, funny you should ask. My husband and I met and married within 7 weeks. And he was, yeah,
Slow down. Kathy, slow down. Whoa,
yeah,
7 weeks.
7 weeks. And this year it'll be 28 years of marriage.
Congratulations.
Yeah. But it was, I asked questions because I was living in California. He was living in Nashville at the time. So a lot of this had to happen over the phone because we weren't able to see each other a whole lot within 7 weeks. So I asked him questions, and he thought, yeah, no, everything is cool. Everybody's happy. And apparently that really wasn't the case.
At the time, how old were his kids?
The youngest was just turning 3, and the oldest one was 4.5.
And at that time, you didn't have any kids, correct?
No.
So going into, that's difficult. Number one, long distance. Number two, a short courtship. 3, going into a new blended family. But here's where I want to question to you, Kathy, and this is when my wife and I were first dating, and it's obviously different in your situation because you don't have kids, but when my wife and I were first dating, we had a pact, and the pact was if our kids didn't get along, we weren't going to continue the relationship, because we didn't feel it was fair to the kids to be put into a situation where they're forced to like each other, forced to live under the same roof. So again, it's a different situation, but when was there a time where maybe in the back of your mind you're thinking, maybe this isn't the right time to get married right now to this man, or was there?
That moment never happened, where I thought this was a bad idea. It was after we got married that I thought maybe this isn't such a great idea. Um, but it was, but I made the commitment.
So who moved where?
I moved to Nashville.
Oh, good for you. Great part of
Yeah.
the country.
Well, he had his kids, they were little and they needed their dad. So, and it wasn't, this was not their choice. So I certainly was not going to, separate them, so for him to move here. So that was the decision that we had made.
Well, and to talk about your book, I'm sure it would have been, a uh, major court cost to uh, for one parent to move out of state anyway.
No, on something like that, if it was going to be my husband to move, no, it wouldn't. There wouldn't have needed anything. I mean, unless he wanted to, make some changes to the visitation, and so there wouldn't be much involved with that essentially. So that was not an issue. It was a lot. It was maybe staying there that cost us a lot of money. So
Well, so you wrote this book for many of, and quite honestly, I do wish I had had this book when I was going through not only my divorce but my court case with my former spouse about she tried to move out of state as well. And your book really does cover some basic necessities, going through um, a divorce. Well, post divorce, let's say. Um,
right.
I don't know where to start other than one of the things you said in your book that the father should be responsible for writing the check for child support.
Probably the overarching lessons in the book is for stepmoms to stay out of as much of that stuff that is to take place between their husband and their former spouse, so as to minimize any flack that could come back to the stepmom. So if you're a reminder to this woman, okay, even though maybe they've all moved on and done their thing, that is just human relationships. People don't want to be in touch with someone's new love. They just, and by receiving checks, with their signature on it, or them, doing all, any dealings with the new wife, it's just could cause some real problems for some people. Not everyone, but some people will experience that. But it's also too that if you infuse yourself into a situation with that former couple, and if there are any legal issues down the road, you can be called in. You can be questioned. You can, be put on the stand. You can be deposed. You can go through a lot of things. But if you stay out of it, they have nothing to ask you about.
Well, so to use our life, um, we don't do it that way. The way, and I know every situation is different, Kathy, but the way we do it is for that check is electronic. So luckily, like you were talking about, with a signature or even having the names on the check, those things electronically, it takes that emotion out of it. So that might be something we can recommend to other families in that situation.
Oh, absolutely. Technology has been able to eliminate a lot of the necessity to connect in any way. Even like, emails or any, or checks or whatever it may be.
One of the tips you had in there was the calendar. Can you talk about that? Because I thought really brilliant about the your idea for the calendar.
Yeah, when if you're having if you see that your spouse is having an issue with the visitation with the children, if you're keeping track of everything that happens with that visitation, say they changed that weekend, that they're making repeated requests for you to take the children, to being late, to any issue that happens, if you record all of that in a calendar, that when it comes time, if you have to go back into court for whatever reason, and you have this calendar with a complete log, you'll be able to demonstrate that a couple of things. One, maybe there had been a de facto change of custody that occurred because you have the kids far more than what the order had originally called for. It could also be that if somebody's causing problems with making the visitation and having access, that this shows to the courts that you've got a problem person on your hands, and that could also affect a change of custody with the courts. So keeping a record of what's going on can really be immensely helpful. You might be able to see a pattern in the beginning, maybe your first few visits that are missed, that the other parent is not allowing access. But if you start seeing a pattern, start recording it.
Yeah, actually, my attorney had highly recommended that because I mean, just like in your book, it's a very important point because if your child support reflects visitation throughout that year, that is going to change. And one of the things that I've started to do, which I'm a very good procrastinator, is now keeping track of that because my son is 16. If there are times, so for example, this is our weekend to have him, but he had to work. So in those situations, I lose out on time. Therefore, I do keep track of that in case, just like you said, in case you end up back in court. Now have a record showing the times you were supposed to have your kids, but in hindsight, you didn't have your kids.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the things that I see people struggle with a lot, and it comes down to a he said, she said, and then you're trying to recall what took place over the span of 3 or 4 months, and everyone's busy. So it's just if you have a calendar, log everything. This can be admitted as evidence into a court case.
Yeah, and again, it's something that can really help in the long run.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So one of the things you also mentioned in the book is what does it mean when you say how to get the support you deserve and never feel alone?
When you, and especially for a woman, becoming a stepmom, going into you're walking into this already ready-made family, and it's not just your husband and the former spouse, but the you also have other people involved. You have your in-laws. You have your husband's ex's in-laws. I mean, her family. You have all these kids. They have a history together. You're walking in cold. You don't know any of these people, and they've had years generally to be able to develop these relationships. So, and if your friends aren't experiencing what you're experiencing, no one knows what you're going through. And so it's, being able to find, the information that you need, because you also are probably not familiar with how things work, like especially in the court system, and what people, can do and say, and, what people get away with. And so by having a guide, and that's why I wrote the book, this is a guide for stepmoms so that they know, listen, okay, you may feel alone in all of this, but, with this book, you're not going to be alone. These are things that, can really be able to help you so that you can develop a relationship with your husband, and also with the kids. The book was not designed for, like, okay, how well can we blend everybody and all that touchy feely stuff, because that's not what this is about. I mean, that's important, but that's not why I wrote this book. This was designed to be able to give them actual tools that they can use in case they are going crazy over what is happening in their life. And so that they know, listen, okay, it's okay. I can back off here and just let the people involved in this deal with their own stuff. Because as women, we like to fix things in relationships. And maybe this is one time when you just need to not do that.
Real, because I normally hear the opposite from other men, that it's the men trying to fix the relationship.
Not in relationships. They'll try to fix all kinds of other things. But women, we relate to each other, to other people, with emotions. Men generally don't. And so, and we can start to feel guilty. We can see our stepchildren, who are struggling because of what their parents are doing or failing to do. And so our natural inclination may be to just swoop in and, make everything better for everyone. And it just sometimes can backfire. So you really have to be able to understand that, it's okay. If you see your stepkids struggling in school, they have two parents. Let the parents deal with it. It's not that if you can help, and if the kid really, really wants the help, that's great. But if there's resistance, they have two parents. It's not necessary to have a third parent in there. Does that make sense?
So are you saying that, you really don't want to be part of their life, but more as a third party?
No, I think probably approaching it more as being their friend rather than being a parent.
Really? Why?
They have parents. I mean, think about it. If you're a kid and now your parents are divorced and you've got new people in there and they're infusing what they think, should be happening with you as a parent. I think I might resent that as a kid.
Well, I do come from divorce. I was 5 when my parents divorced, and my
Mhm.
mom did remarry. But I think that the thing about my bonus dad is that because he had the experience of being a parent, really helped solidify our relationship. And to this day, I have some great memories of time spent with him. I don't think I really wanted a friend. I really do believe I needed more of, because I didn't have the opportunity to see my dad as often as I would like to. So that's where I do feel that maybe it they needed more of or in my situation, I wanted more of a parent than a friend.
If the other parent, if both parents are present, um, it could create an issue if there are unresolved issues, I guess, with the other people, with all the people, with the ex, with your husband. If because I have my stepsons, their mother remarried twice, and so the second, or the first stepfather, her second husband, he really was trying to be dad, and and it and because they know their dad, because they have their dad, they were struggling with that. They wanted him to be more of a friend and let their dad be their dad. He should be doing the discipline. The mother should be doing the discipline. You don't need additional people to do that. I think it's great when you can have some supportive people in there. I mean, I have great relationships with my step. We have a lot of great memories. But if there was any problem with the kids, I just let their parents handle it. They have parents. That's what, without sounding like so detached from it. It wasn't that at all. I mean, I played with them. We had so much fun, while they were growing up. We had a tremendous time. The four of us, we went to Europe, together when they were, 20, 21. We had a blast. I mean, we've been doing a lot of those things, but but I left the discipline and, that other stuff up to their parents.
Well, and that's something you mentioned too is discipline, and that was one of the open conversations my wife and I had was discipline. And my son and my bonus daughter, one of my bonus daughters, they're very similar in age. And then my wife's oldest, we sat down and said, all right, as far as discipline in this house goes, my wife would discipline, if I'm around, my wife would actually discipline her oldest and I would handle the other two. And again, every situation is different, Kathy, but
Mm-hmm.
that was part of, and I know you don't like the touchy-feely blended family books, but my wife and I, before we even got married, this is something I always recommend to, especially people that are going to get into a blended family, is go to a marriage counselor. Start off on the right foot, because we were able to hash out things like the discipline and finances. So I like the fact that we were able to have those questions about discipline. Those situations arose. And if it's a situation where you're saying that you're going to take a step back and let the parents do it, which I understand. But if it's a situation where there needs to be discipline, there needs to be discipline.
Well, no, there is. I would stop them if they were going to get injured for doing something stupid that required discipline, but the discipline always went to my husband or to their mother, because and it's not. I want to backtrack a little bit. It's not that I don't appreciate the touchy feely books about blended family and even marriage counseling beforehand, but if you have to have the other parent involved in that marriage counseling. I'm not sure that I would want some other woman, disciplining my child. I don't think I would want that. And I know that when my husband, when he learned that his oldest son had been smacked by his spouse, his ex-wife's husband, that he was livid. He thought, "You're not going to touch my child." And so the decision for discipline is not with you as the step parent, but rather between the parents. They're the parents of the kids. And Tommy, and let me add this. It's really funny because I have friends, guys who married a woman with children, and they're more interested in doing the discipline than stepmoms. Stepdads seem to be like more of that take control of a situation than a stepmom. That in my personal experience.
Interesting.
Yeah, because I'd never lay a finger on my stepkids ever.
Oh, I've never hit my son. I would never, ever. I'm one of those dads, anti-spanking. You're creating violence.
Well, and I have to say, I had dinner with my youngest stepson a few months back, and just the two of us. And one thing that he said, and it was just like such an incredible compliment. I felt it was just so touching. And he said, he was talking about his first stepfather and just how that guy put a lot of stress on those kids. And he said, he said, in all these years, he said, we've never had a bad time with you at all. He said, I just love you. And and it was because of that approach. They knew I was there to protect them if need be, but I let their parents be their parents.
So how did you avoid becoming the so-called step witch?
Um, um, I I have a lot of experience with kids. So I grew up in a large family and lots of siblings. I had a ton of nieces and nephews. So that by the time I got married, and so it's like I just wanted to have fun with these kids when they were with us. And I mean, there was just nothing. They were kids. They would sometimes try to get into like our conversations, and I would tell them, "No, you're a kid. Your job is to go play. Your dad and I, we're having our own adult conversation. You go play." And I just took all the stress off of them. Just allow them to be kids and allow them to not be embroiled in any of their parents' stuff. It was, or at least on our side, it was, we had a rule: never speak a harsh word about their mother in front of those kids ever. And we never did. Well, I think once my husband did, and it freaked the kids out. So, but that was him, not me.
What advice would you give to potential step parents on building relationships with their future bonus kids?
Just let the kids be kids. Um, you know, and don't try to get your point across. It's like, okay, yeah, we get it. The parents, they are divorced, and maybe there's a lot of, a lot of acrimony involved, and maybe even some unresolved, stuff that they're dealing with. But you can't let the kids feel any of that. It's not. This is not their choice. So it's really just, yeah, just let them be kids. Just, treat them almost like you would like, yeah, a niece or nephew. Um, you know, yeah. I mean, it's really pretty simple. It's like, don't try to be their parent.
Well, I think that what you're saying too is, go in and it's not your way or the highway. Let them, organically adopt you, so to speak.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, don't push it. I know my stepson's first stepfather. I mean, almost immediately. I mean, I think right after the wedding, he told the kids, "Well, you're going to call me dad from now on." That was not a natural thing for them, and in fact, they complained to us about it. So, and they did not have a good relationship with that guy, and he didn't last very long. Their second stepfather, he's been around for years, and I think they have nothing but respect for him because he stayed out of it.
Well, and again, if you go into that new relationship thinking it's your rules, you are going to lose the kids, and as far as respect goes. And that was one of the things I learned, watching my bonus dad. He didn't come in that way, but at the same time, I firmly believe if it had been a different scenario where he did put the hammer down, yeah, there would have been heck to pay.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, kids, and they resent it. It's not that they're not willing to welcome someone into their lives, a new, a step parent, but how that step parent approaches the situation, and with the kids, and really just kind of really thinking kids first, adults second here, because that was really just not their choice.
So how can we really avoid, Kathy, the world blood sucking lawyers?
Do everything possible to keep everything out of the court system. Don't let the courts make the decisions for you. You are not mandated by any law to engage attorneys and the courts in your family. You're not required to do that. You and, your ex-spouse can come up with your own agreements. However, there's a caveat to that. If there is an existing order there, you really do have to abide by that if it already exists. So if you need to change something, but there are other things that you can do to keep people from wanting to sue you in court. And I put a number of things of ideas in the books on things that someone can do. For example, being able to sit down, have, the husband sit down with his ex-wife and look at the beginning of each year and anticipate some of the expenses that the kid is going to incur that is above and over and beyond the child support that's already being paid. It could be a special camp. It could be a sporting event. It could be prom. Anything that that child support generally does not cover, and then come to terms with that with the ex and say, okay, I'm just going to pay you that. Because if they're feeling the pinch, and many do, their only recourse in many cases is to take the ex-spouse to court and sue for more money. So, and if enough time's lapsed, there's a possibility they'll get it. And then that goes for the life of the child support order.
Well, one of the sad things is when you have, for example, dads who just can't pay child support, and because of that, they end up in jail. And it's sad because here you are taking somebody who's trying, and then you put them in jail, you really can't pay child support.
I think that's on a case by case basis. Yes, there are certainly people out there that are struggling financially and maybe having some difficulty. They can always go back to the court and they can do this themselves. They don't have to hire a lawyer to do it, but they can go back into the court and say, and ask for a review. And show what their finances are so that they can make another payment schedule. The thing is that if they did not get a divorce, what would be their option? I mean, they still have to support the kid. So now I know that it might cost them a little bit more, but I guess this is also a case for choose wisely in the beginning, so that you're not going to end up in divorce court to begin with. But barring that, they do have to make some arrangements because it's their child or children. They are responsible for supporting them.
Well, one of my pet peeves with lawyers, and I hate to generalize, but they take on cases and they don't look at the big picture. They don't look at what is impacting the family. For example, when you do have, family court cases where a parent is, to use my example, one parent is trying to leave the state. I really wish my former spouse's lawyer would have looked at her and said, "You're insane," because, and this is where, to use your title of your book, this is where I wanted to allegedly kill her, because we end up in court for this. But I really wish her attorney had said, your former husband is an involved parent. He pays his child support. I wouldn't have had to max out my credit card. I wouldn't have had to borrow money from family. I wouldn't have had to borrow money from my current wife. It's insane that an attorney would even take a case like that. And all, in my view, my opinion, is they're looking at dollar signs, and they're looking at, again, my view of screwing the father in those situations. That's me on my soapbox.
Well, they're in business to make money, and that's how they do it. They're not the moral police. So they're going to, and they're required to, without passion or prejudice, represent their client. So that's, their opinion of the situation is immaterial. They are, required to do what the client wants them to do. Now, I think where courts, make the mistake, but a lot of states are changing things in that respect too, about being able to move out of state, because they are putting that restriction on this. And it is so devastating to kids when this happens. My stepchildren were moved out of state about a year and a half after my husband and I married. They were moved to Kentucky. And then from there, they were moved to St. Louis. They kept getting further and further away. And it is impossible for a father to have a relationship with his children when only seeing them 3 days, 4 days, maybe a month. I mean, you couldn't maintain a marriage like that. So certainly you're not going to maintain a relationship with your children. But the attorneys don't care. The courts don't care. There's a great documentary called Divorce Inc. You can watch that. It's incredible what actually takes place. The system is designed to deplete families' assets. It's designed that way. And I feel quite passionate about, the reform, the tort reform in the family courts, and being able to stop parents from just taking children away from other parents.
Yeah, I know exactly that documentary, and it's heartbreaking to watch.
Yeah, well, and it destroys families. I mean, it destroys family trees. I mean, you consider that if a system robs a parent of $50,000, $100,000 or more, that's college educations that are gone. That changes a family tree by doing that. And so that's why parents, if they're smart, that before they start getting lawyers involved in the process and the courts, that they get together and decide what's going to make sense for our family. I mean, a lot of people, that, yeah, they meet other people. And that's the other thing too. I mean, maybe parents, really shouldn't remarry until the kids are 18, or that there are laws that prohibit families from moving a certain distance away from each other until a child is 18, to be able to, maintain, a family. But this, but what parents are spending in legal fees is shocking. And that really needs to stop, so that the more that people can learn about how the process works and start going into court if need be, and doing it, pro se, by representing themselves, it just might start changing things. Judges will hate it. Well, I'll tell you why the judges will hate it. Because the money that the attorneys are generating, that money is often funneled into the system for the election of the judges, so that there can be more favorable decisions for, for the judge will make in favor of that attorney who contributed to their campaign.
Well, I want to take one step back here, Kathy, and that is, how do you create a peaceful relationship with your husband's former?
Keep it arm's length. You can be polite, be civil, just minimal interaction, unless there's she's okay, unless she's a decent person. If she isn't, it's like, don't text her, don't send her emails, don't, show up at every event. So many people try to do that, and I watch that, and they know that the ex is really annoyed to begin with, so they just infuse themselves even more, and that's ridiculous. And if you have to be an event, just stay in the background.
For me, a lot of the authors that talk about blended families have never been part of a blended family. So that's my caveat to so-called experts. But I totally agree with you. And, just because you're at a sporting event doesn't mean you have to sit with your former spouse. Your kids know. They're not dumb. They know the two of you don't like each other. So I've always been in the habit of I actually stand by myself somewhere else. I'm not around the parents. As a former youth hockey coach and still a parent, a youth hockey player, we parents are idiots. So there, to help alleviate my idiotness, I stay away from the parents. I stay away from my former. I stand somewhere else. My son knows I'm there at the game. I totally agree that you don't have to sit with your former spouse. It's just it can be confusing with the kids as well.
Yeah, but yeah, for the subsequent spouses, if there's a problem in the relationships, it's like make yourself scarce. I mean, not to say that you should, I mean, you could be front and center with your kids at a sporting event, but anytime that we had an event, I would just kind of stay in the background just so that, and it doesn't mean necessarily, and I'll tell you a story. I was at one of the kids' T-ball games and I was sitting way in the back of the bleachers there. And some woman came up and was talking to me, and I guess she knew the ex, and because it's kind of a small town outside of Nashville, and it wasn't. I didn't think anything of it. I just said, "Oh yeah, I'm their stepmom," and that's all I said. And I think it came up later that she said, "Yes, my friend told her that you were their mother." And so, like, even as much as you're trying to stay in the background and not cause trouble, things could still happen. So, but had I been much more front and center there, out, really gregarious, whatever I was doing, I think it probably would have been a lot worse than just having that one comment. So, but so you just know it's, you're his wife. You're not anything else to anybody else. You're his wife.
Yeah, I call it invisible parenting.
Yeah.
How to kill your husband's ex attorney and then some. Kathy, one last question for you. Kathy, what has changed in your life these past 12 months?
I think that there's just been a lot more peace. I realized we actually were at an event in Nashville for my youngest stepson's birthday that his mother had hosted, a really lovely event. And so we went, and I felt almost all of the past stuff gone. And it's just like it's all dissipated. It took a long, long time, but it was really glad. I was really glad to see that whatever veil of I don't know, and I don't want to say anger or frustration, or maybe it's all of that, because of the long history that we had with this. That for me, it was gone. And that was a big change because once that's gone, the stuff that you can focus on in your life and be able to achieve, it's just unbelievable.
Like a piece.
Yes, but it's almost like something has been lifted off of you. I felt like this weight gone. I mean, I was there with the ex, with her husband, her family, and there were a couple of people misbehaving, but it just didn't matter anymore. And it was just like I just felt like, wow, okay, that's past, and I've got this great future. I don't have to worry about any of that, because my husband and I were plagued for a number of years with attorneys' bills and court cases, and I mean all this nonsense that all it did was suck the life out of both of us. And that's why I wrote that book, because I thought I don't want anyone else to experience that. And if I can help.
How did your marriage stay solid during that time, though?
Well, I think first we're both really still crazy about each other. So that, that
Aw.
helps. It just seems like yesterday that we got married. We still just, I don't know what it is. It like pure luck, that we found each other in that. Um, and we really just supported each other. And I think I really did try very hard to not overstep my boundaries. And, I mean, I would give my husband a lot of direction, but I really did try to stay out of stuff as much as I could. I mean, sometimes I'd get angry. People would push my buttons, and I would respond. But I think it was just that we knew we were this was the commitment we made, and we're really kind of nuts about each other still.
That's a good thing.
Yes.
How can people get your book, Kathy?
It's on Amazon, so you can buy it on Amazon. I also my website, Kathy Hammond Books with an S.com. You can read more about that in my other book, and that's how you can get the book.
Perfect. Well, Kathy, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for coming on, and I really appreciate your honesty and your openness. And again, this is one of those books where I really wish, again, I had when I was going through my divorce. I think I would have saved some headaches and maybe some money.
A
lot of money.